I've recently finished reading this book, Is This Autism? And I took a lot away from it, and I want to share some of the main things that stood out to me throughout this book. I want to make sure I say right here at the beginning, though, that this book contains an incredible amount of information. And what I'm sharing here are just some of the things that I picked out to discuss. In fact, I actually wrote another post about this too with some other takeaways that I had. I have a link for this book in the description. So make sure that you order a copy and read it for yourself because it contains so much information on the complexity of autism spectrum disorders. My name is Keegan. I recently graduated with a master's in counseling. I'm a therapist and I make videos like this to help you prepare for the NCE, the CPCE, or other counseling exams. And sometimes in some of the videos, like this one, I also talk about some other things that are related to counseling, psychology, and mental health more generally or more overall, because I think that they're important things for us to understand also. So whether you're working in the mental health field, if you have autism yourself, or maybe you know somebody that has autism, I hope that you find this video and this book to be really helpful in expanding your understanding of autism. Early on in the book, there was a quote that hit me. It says, "Disability results from a poor fit between a person and their environment. The lack of environmental support or flexibility is disabling." Society seems to often want us to think that people are disabled because of the condition that they have. However, this quote hit me because it's putting the problem on the environment, not the person. I also appreciate this quote because I think it might give people with autism and their loved ones more hope in life because it's putting the problem on the environment and helping that person with autism maybe see that it's not anything necessarily wrong with them. It's just that the way that they operate is different than how the world is kind of created for us, unfortunately. I also want to jump in here with a quick note. Throughout this video, I'm going to be using person first and identity first language. When we talk about identity first language, that would be saying an autistic person. And when we talk about person first language, that would be putting the person before a diagnosis. So in this case, saying a person with autism. I know that in general, people in the autism community prefer to be called autistic or prefer that identity first language. However, there are still some people that prefer the person first language, and so in this video, I'm going to be switching back and forth between both of them. I think that society has this viewpoint that an autistic person cannot have a normal or fulfilling life. Certainly, as is the case for anyone with any diagnosis, it comes with its challenges. That said, life can still be enjoyed. There's a quote in the book that was making me think about this, so I want to share that quote with you here. They said, "People who have this different kind of nervous system experience process and respond to the world differently from non-autistics in a number of ways." I take that to mean that sure, the person with autism may interact with the world in a different way, but that doesn't make it wrong. Indeed, for autistic people, their experience with the world is different. There was a section of the book that was related to many of the different ways that autistic people can be different, including how they're more likely to become ill. Not only that, but they're also at increased risk for multiple other co-occurring conditions or various experiences in life. Related to mental health alone, autistic people are more likely to have anxiety, depression, obsessive compulsive disorder, and experience trauma in life, just to name a few. As we move along, there's also this thought in society that people with autism have increased abilities in some area while they still struggle in some others. For example, when somebody shares that their child is autistic, the other person might respond by saying how many autistic people end up being gifted in some area. Although this response is probably well-meaning, and because the person doesn't know exactly how to respond to this news, and they're also likely trying to be more positive about the situation, I think it's still important for us to know the facts related to autistic people and being gifted or having superpowers, as they say in the book. So for those who we'd call gifted, this could also be referred to as savant syndrome. And it happens for people in the general population about 1% of the time. And savant syndrome is simply where somebody has incredible skill in one specific area. Like I said, the general population experiences savant syndrome about 1% of the time. And for the autistic community, they do experience savant syndrome more often. In fact, 10 to 28% of autistic people could have savant syndrome. And although autistic people are more likely to have savant syndrome, I really thought that this one quote from the book was powerful. What they said is, "It's critically important to allow autistic people the privilege of having no superpowers, just as we allow non-autistic people that privilege." Next, we're going to talk about the 8 senses rather than the 5 senses we typically talk about. But first, if you're enjoying this video and finding it helpful, please help me out by giving it a like and subscribing so you don't miss any future videos. Okay, there is so much from this book that I could cover, but in an effort to keep it somewhat concise, I want to talk about the 8 senses next. Most of you are probably familiar with our 5 senses: sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell. However, in the book, Is This Autism?, they add on 3 additional senses that are important to be aware of when it comes to people with autism. So other than our usual 5 senses, the book also adds on the 6th, which is proprioception. Proprioception is our ability to know our body's position and movement based on the internal sensations of our muscles. The 7th sense is vestibular. This is related to the sense of movement and position that we get from the workings of our inner ear. And the 8th and final sense is interoception, which is the awareness of our internal sensations. And when it comes to interoception, this can include things like whether or not we need to use the bathroom, if we're feeling hungry or not, if we're thirsty and maybe need a drink, or it could even relate to our emotional state. All 8 of these senses are important to keep in mind when it comes to someone with autism because it can really influence their experience. One of the diagnostic criteria for autism is over-responsivity. And when we talk about over-responsivity, this could actually happen with any of the 8 senses that we talked about. Is This Autism discusses how over-responsivity is from sensory sensitivity and how it can result in meltdowns, which would be an externalizing behavior, or it could look like somebody being startled by a quiet noise, which would be considered an unusual response, or how autistic people can often avoid a stimuli they find offensive. On the flip side, autistic people can also have under-responsivity to any of the 8 senses. This could include things like little reaction to pain, reduced sense of when to go to the bathroom, or a general decreased sensitivity to noise. Autistic people can also crave sensory experiences. This could lead to a whole discussion on special interests. But for the sake of this conversation, just know that people with autism can crave specific sensory experiences. And as a result, you may see an autistic person do things like chew on their sleeve, having a really strong attraction to a specific texture, or wanting strong pressure applied to them, just to name a few. Finally, people with autism can have unusual sensory experiences. This is one of the ways that they may experience the world differently than non-autistic people. When we talk about unusual sensory experiences, one of the most extreme versions of this would be synesthesia. Although not exclusive to autistic people, synesthesia is about 3 times more common in people with autism. Synesthesia is a phenomenon where sensory experiences trigger seemingly unrelated senses. For example, someone may experience food tasting like a shape, or they may experience sounds having colors. Like I've said, this barely scratches the surface of all that I've learned from this book. There's a link in the description if you're interested in purchasing a copy of the book, and a link to my post where I cover additional highlights that I've taken away. I hope that you found this video on autism helpful, and while you're here, make sure that you check out some of the other videos on the channel as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.